Hi everybody, my name is Dave Shackelford with the SANS Institute, and I'm excited to be here with you guys today. I'm also joined by Craig Harbour, the Chief Technology Officer for Fidelis Cybersecurity Solutions. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me, Dave.
Yeah, I'm really excited because we've been engaged actually in really looking at new opportunities and new ways for cybersecurity professionals to start thinking about not only getting in front of some of the attacks that are happening out there today, but also looking at some of the tools and different methods that they can take advantage of, as well as frameworks that have been developed in the industry to help us actually improve our detection and all of our just general security operations overall. So again, very exciting times. So Craig, the first question I have for you, just sort of thinking about the nature of the adversaries out there and so forth today. We know they're more sophisticated than they've ever been.
Yep.
Threat detection is getting harder, right? So these guys are much more sophisticated. They're, certainly getting better at hiding and so forth, sort of the low and slow, stealthy approach. How can we actually sort of outmaneuver and sort of potentially outperform these guys, right? Try to get in front of them.
Yeah, so I think, as we've started to think about it, I say been in the kind of five kind of topical areas to start to think about. So to your point, right, the adversaries are out there, they're becoming more complicated, more complex, and really understanding the way they attack systems. So I think starting with understanding their motives and the techniques they use, and today those are embodied in cyber threat frameworks, right? There's a number of them out there. MITRE ATT&CK is out there, the Lockheed Martin kill chain. The DoD, for example, has generated one called DODCAR for DoD Cyber Analysis Review. There's an equivalent for DHS called GovCAR. And I think really understanding the motives and the intent of the adversary is probably the first thing, right? Is you can't defend what you don't really understand. So I think that's where I would start. Kind of the second big thing is, traditionally I think our defensives have been more reactive in nature, right? If you think about the life cycle of an attack, there's a point at which costs go up, right? And that's really the point of impact. And too often we've been doing detect and respond right there. And I think we really need to think about how do we move kind of left? How do we essentially start to understand what's going on sooner? And how do we take action sooner, right? And so that kind of ties into kind of this next area that really to understand and think about how do we automate things more. Traditionally, we haven't done a good job of that. And I think, we've essentially deployed these large cybersecurity stacks because over time, as we started to better understand what's going on, we essentially bought another vendor product and added to the stack. And then we saw something else interesting and we bought another product. And in time, what has happened is our cybersecurity stacks have become unmanageable. They're 75. Matter of fact, we were just at an industry partner who has over 100 different products in their stack. And they all require different management systems, right? And they're all generating information. And how do you correlate that and make sense of it? And at the same time, realize that the attacker is using automation tools. They're using machine learning. And so I think we need to kind of bring that as part of our repertoire of things that we're applying to this problem. Kind of the fourth area really is thinking about deception, right? And how do we take advantage of deception techniques where rather than being kind of in this reactive mode, how do we essentially take it to the adversary? And so, one of the things that we're bringing out as part of our product is dynamic deception capabilities, the ability to change the attack surface. So, typically, the adversary does a lot of recon, they understand our networks extremely well, and now they're taking advantage of the fact that they know our networks better than we do. So kind of that fifth thing that we really need to have is visibility, right? And understanding pure visibility of our networks. Think about like cyber terrain. What are all the assets that exist within your network? How are they connected? How are they used? Where is that mission critical data at? And so I think having a real good understanding in those five areas and then applying that understanding to better improve our defensive posture really is where we need to take this going forward.
Yeah, I would agree. And just on that note, do you feel as though some of these frameworks you mentioned, right, things like DODCAR, things like MITRE ATT&CK, are pretty reflective of the attack scenarios that we've learned and been seeing for the last 10 years? Is that where things are today?
I think so. I grew up in the DoD. I've spent 33 plus years at the DoD, working at the National Security Agency, working at U.S. Cyber Command, and actually worked on something called NASCAR, which is now really referred to as DODCAR. And that whole premise was that if you look traditionally at the defenses that we bought, we didn't really think about adversary and have a good understanding. And I think what we've seen over the last 5 years since that work has started, and as well as the MITRE work and the Lockheed Martin work, is really understanding the attacker and mapping our coverage capabilities, not just from an acquisition standpoint, which was, I'll say, the initial efforts within the DODCAR, for example, but to now instrument your network and be able in real time to understand what's happening. And this gets back to this idea of what I call left of boom, right? Rather than waiting for impact, taking that understanding of what we're seeing from an attack sequence as it's happening and automatically adjust your defensive posture. I think one of the things that we've seen is we started to create these, what I call threat maps or heat maps, right? So the interesting thing about, I'll take MITRE for example, I think there's 244 plus techniques right across the kill chain.
Right.
Well, the question is, how do you defend against all? And can you afford to defend against all? Or if you take and look at the top 50 campaigns that have happened in the last 5 years, and if you lay those on top of the framework, you start to get an indication of commonly used techniques that the attackers are using. Mm-hmm. So I think you can use that to kind of start to think about, if I had to phase in my responses and my defenses, use that understanding of, so what is the attackers doing, start to target those as my defenses, right, and making sure that they're positioned incorrectly within your infrastructure. I mean, you have all kinds of things happening, from zero trust to the segmentation as part of zero trust. You still have traditional perimeter architectures. So understanding the architecture, understanding the attacks, the most commonly used threats, and where best to position defensive capabilities, I think is a great way to leverage the understanding of those frameworks.